All right, guys, let's go ahead and get this second video done. Okay, we're starting off after the Dred Scott decision. We've started talking about a lot of the causes of the Civil War, fueling of the abolitionists, the social anxiety, the North versus the South, the economical differences, obviously, politically, anything from the nullification crisis all the way back with Jackson to the Kansas-Nebraska Act overturning the Missouri Compromise. You have a ton of stuff leading up to this. And it seems ironic that we would talk about a single human, okay, as being one of the largest causes of the Civil War, but I do believe this man pushed it over the edge. So go ahead and pause this, get it down, and let's talk about Harpers Ferry. Now, Harpers Ferry, actually, you need to put a little arrow out beside Harpers Ferry and put Virginia. Okay, and there was an abolitionist. Actually, this abolitionist, his name was John Brown. And John Brown actually had been a free soiler in the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And if we have time, we're going to do a John Brown lesson. John Brown's a very interesting man. He's kind of a little bit, in my opinion, like Nat Turner. But he believes that it is his job to free the slaves. So he plans an insurrection actually with his sons, and he helps. He wants to help free the slaves by giving them guns. So he plans an attack on Harper's Ferry, which is an arsenal. Okay, right here, what you wrote, arsenal. Circle it. That's where they keep weapons, right? So when this happens, the slaves are supposed to come and reinforce him. You want to probably make certain you notate out beside this the big problem with John Brown's Harpers Ferry: the slaves never showed up. The federal troops put down the rebellion. Ironically, the general in charge was Robert E. Lee. Interesting enough. And John Brown ends up being hung and sentenced to death. And his statement is, for me, very foretelling. His sons had died. He was a martyr in the North Sides. You might look up what is a martyr, and he's a terrorist to the South. But he says it, and he says it perfectly. He said, "I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land can never be purged away," which means cleaned, "but with blood," meaning war's going to happen. The effects of Harper's Ferry, in my opinion, are quite significant. It strengthens the abolitionists in the North because they said, oh my gosh, this guy was willing to go die for abolitionism. We should do more. It boosts the abolitionist movement in the North, but it's the turning point for the South because they say, oh my gosh, they're going to try and give weapons to the slaves. They're going to try and kill us. And again, going back to Nat Turner, this will increase the restrictions and the hatred and the racism and all of this stuff on the slaves. So after this, the South is like, all right, we're going to war. So effects of Harper's Ferry, pretty significant. And then the straw that breaks the camel's back, Lincoln. 1860 presidential election. Pause this, get it down. Abraham Lincoln breaks with the Whigs. He becomes the first ever Republican. You might want to jot that down. First Republican. Pledges to halt the further spread of slavery. Note, he did not say he would end slavery. He does not want to get into that battle. All he says is, I will stop it from spreading. Kind of interesting. He reassures the Southerners, you can have your slaves. We just don't want it spreading. He's viewed as an enemy by many Southerners. He doesn't even actually get a majority of the votes. He actually gets less than half the popular votes. And he gets no electoral votes in the South. And the ironic thing is in a couple states, his name didn't even appear on the ballot. So when he wins the election, the South feels like they have absolutely no voice. And I hate to side with the South. Take yourself out of 2016, knowing they're, for slavery. But if you had a president that didn't even show up on a ballot, would you feel like that's democracy? So they had an issue with the election of Lincoln. So directly after that is when South Carolina seceded. So pause this, get it down. We're going to talk about this a lot in class. I've got some really good videos, and we're going to also watch a crash course. So going to be more. All right. So South Carolina seceded. What does it mean to secede? It means to withdraw. Okay. So they withdrew from the Union December 20th, 1860. Okay. You need to note that December 20th, end of 1860. Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. They formed what they called, you guys know this, Confederate States. I do want you to star Jefferson Davis as who they elected president. The first actual beginning, first shots fired in the Civil War will happen at Fort Sumter. And basically the Confederacy demanded the Union leave the fort, and they said no, and they fired each other, and that's in April of 61, which marks the beginning of the Civil War. Now, the next part, I'm going to be honest with you, is just all about the battles. So you're going to pause it at each one, get them down. We're going to talk about these battles, and I'll tell you which ones are really important. But the first battle of Bull Run, like I said, Fort Sumter was the start, but the first actual battle, okay, is Bull Run, and it made it clear that the North needed a large, well-trained army to defeat the South. But here's what I want you to know about it also. This is the battle that the North actually thought they were going to win so easily that they invited their wives and their families out, and they sat on top of a hill. I don't know, there's one middle school history teacher that tells this story, so some of y'all might know it. They actually sat on the hill outside of Bull Run, and they had like finger sandwiches and were watching the battle. The North thought that, oh, the little cute Southerners, they're just rebelling. Oh, let's go watch. The South kicked their you-know-what. This battle goes win South, okay? The W goes to the South on this one, and the North was like, oh, crap, we underestimated them. So this brings meaning to never underestimate your opponent, okay? Because that's what happens. Battle of Bull Run. Get your butt kicked. So they kind of, all of a sudden, need a strategy. I'll be honest with you, the Anaconda Plan, what I want you to do is I want you to look up what the Anaconda Plan is. There are 3 pieces to it, and I will be asking you what it is. So write Anaconda Plan, maybe Google it. But you should find pretty simply that it's the Northern strategy, or Lincoln strategy, if you will. Now, significant battle, Antietam. Pause it, get it down. All right, Antietam, significance, early turning point of the war. I call this the moral turning point of the war because it actually will be and still is the bloodiest one-day battle in American history ever. Convinced Lincoln that the time had come to end slavery. He said, if you are going to lose this many men, because you got to remember, the Civil War's, and this might be good to notate somewhere, the Civil War's death count is not 50% Americans and 50% another country. It's America versus America. So 100% of the casualties are American. So it's the highest death count in all of history for America. And Lincoln said, if we're going to lose this many men, it needs to be for a reason. We need to abolish slavery. So he takes and he says, after Antietam, the Emancipation Proclamation. I will say this is also the turning point a little bit because the Union victory convinced Great Britain and France they should stay neutral. See, they kind of wanted to back the South because guess what they got from the South? Cotton. So it was kind of like a Saratoga American Revolution battle, but in reverse. They decided not to get involved, but to stay out because, obviously a divided America is weaker, so they liked that idea, so they wanted to support the Confederacy, but after they saw Antietam, they were like, maybe not a good idea. Now, next battle, Vicksburg. Circle the V. Take this down. Now, Vicksburg is essential to the Anaconda Plan. So if you've looked it up, you're going to find out that one of the pieces of the Anaconda Plan was to split the Confederacy in two because, again, what did I just say? Divided is weaker. So they decide to attack Vicksburg. It's right on the Mississippi, and by taking over the Mississippi, you now have the Confederacy can't transport anything, including messages, across the Mississippi. They have been officially split up. I like to remember the V because if you hold the V up, are you holding the V up with your fingers? A V, V, and then you look at it from the side, it looks like a pair of scissors, okay? So it cuts the Confederacy in two. Vicksburg's pretty important strategically. Now, here's the big one. Gettysburg. Significance. Pause it, get it down. Now, this is the turning point in the East. I'm going to be honest with you. This is the turning point pretty much in the entire war. Big turning point, I will say. Union victory ensured Britain does not recognize the Confederacy, and it stopped Lee's advancement in the North. But, of course, Gettysburg is going to probably be known for the Gettysburg Address, which, if we have time, we will be reading in class. So, Gettysburg, very important turning point. Okay? I told you, after Antietam and Gettysburg, Lincoln says, we need to make sure we stop the reason for this war. And when we read his second inaugural, you'll find out he thinks the reason for the war is slavery. And he was right, probably. A lot of other stuff, but slavery is the big one. September 1862 issues the Emancipation Proclamation, which every single elementary schooler says freed the slaves. And it kind of did, kind of. But it only freed them if they were at states at war with the Union. The border states that had not seceded, like Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, and Delaware, they were slave states, but they stayed in the Union, so they were rewarded by keeping the slaves. This gives the war a moral purpose. Be a little bit better if they, abolish slavery altogether. But everybody misinterprets the Emancipation Proclamation. It is not the Emancipation Proclamation, though, that frees the slaves. You might want to write this out beside it. This would be a good quiz question. It's the 13th Amendment. Okay? So make sure you understand Emancipation Proclamation is not the 13th Amendment. Okay? It was a symbol. It gives a moral reason for the war, but it's not the 13th Amendment. But after Gettysburg, after the South starts losing the ability to fight back, because I'm going to be honest with you, the Anaconda Plan was genius. Okay? And you got to think about it, and this might give it away a little bit, but how does an anaconda kill its prey? By suffocating it, right? So when that starts to happen and all of those plans, and then Gettysburg happens, okay, the South just loses everything. They are completely devastated. And this is when General Robert E. Lee surrenders to Grant at, here it is, Appomattox Courthouse. And that's an important one. You might want to highlight that, okay? Now, I have down here at the bottom kind of interesting military deaths in American major wars, and you'll notice the Civil War has about 500,000 deaths. The next leading death toll is World War II, and that's only 291. And I'll be honest with you, the Civil War deaths, I think that it's actually about 100,000 higher than that. That's just documented. So when you look at it throughout history, the Civil War, obviously 100% American deaths, makes a huge difference. And the amendments that came from it, gosh, can you imagine this country without these amendments? Free citizens vote. All right, this is where we'll start the next one.